I rushed through the rain toward Romano's, the upscale Italian restaurant where my parents were celebrating their 25th anniversary. Traffic had been brutal, making me 30 minutes late. I felt guilty about missing their special moment clutching the anniversary card I'd picked up. When I finally burst through the doors soaking wet, I found them lounging at their table with empty plates and satisfied smiles. Mom looked up casually and said, "Oh, you're late. Cover the bill, will you, lol?" That's when I realized something wasn't right. The warm glow of Romano's felt deceptive as I stood there dripping rainwater onto their polished marble floors. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant shadows across white tablecloths, and soft jazz played in the background. This place screamed expensive, which made my stomach tighten as I approached my parents' table near the window. Dad sat back in his chair, patting his belly contentedly while scrolling through his phone. 2 empty wine bottles stood like soldiers beside a collection of cleaned plates. The remnants of what looked like lobster shells and steak bones told the story of a feast I'd completely missed. "Jack, sweetheart, you really should learn to manage your time better," Mom said, dabbing at her lipstick with a cloth napkin. She wore her best pearl necklace and the navy dress she saved for special occasions. "We've been finished for 20 minutes. My sister Sarah emerged from the bathroom, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She took one look at me standing there confused and let out a laugh that echoed through the dining room. Still as clueless as ever. "How could you be late for something this important?" I pulled out my phone to check the text message they'd sent me earlier. The invitation read simply, "Anniversary dinner at Romano's around 8. Hope you can make it." Nothing about start time, nothing about when to arrive. Just around 8. I glanced at my watch. 8:15. "Wait," I said, settling into the empty chair they'd left for me. "You started eating without me?" Dad finally looked up from his phone. His reading glasses perched on his nose. "Well, we couldn't wait forever. We had reservations for 6:30. You know how these fancy places are about timing." 6:30. My brain tried to process this information. They'd made reservations for 6:30, but told me to come around 8. That meant they'd planned this entire evening to end exactly when I arrived. "But the text said 8, I protested, showing Mom my phone screen. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, that was just a rough estimate. We figured you'd want to join us for the end of the meal and maybe help us celebrate." Sarah slid back into her seat across from me, her engagement ring catching the candlelight. "Mom, show him what you ordered. The lobster thermidor was incredible." "And the dry-aged ribeye," Dad added, rubbing his stomach again. "Melted like butter. Plus we got that nice bottle of Cabernet the sommelier recommended. 2012 vintage." My throat felt dry as I picked up the leather-bound wine menu they'd left on the table. The Cabernet they'd chosen cost $89, just for the wine. "Where's the bill?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out a black leather portfolio. "Right here, honey. We thought since you're doing so well with your promotion at the engineering firm, you might want to treat us for our anniversary. It would mean so much." I opened the portfolio and nearly choked. $287. For 2 people. At a restaurant I'd never agreed to pay for, at a meal I'd never been properly invited to attend. "You expected me to pay for this?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "Well, families help each other," Dad said, finally putting down his phone. "We raised you, fed you, put you through college. This is just payback time." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, you make good money anyway. It's not like this would break the bank for you." I stared at my family, really stared at them, for the first time that evening. Mom's pearl necklace probably cost more than this dinner. Dad's watch was a Rolex he'd bought himself last Christmas. Sarah's engagement ring had a diamond the size of a pea. None of them looked like they were struggling financially. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "Planning what?" Mom's laugh sounded forced. "Jack, you're being dramatic." We just thought it would be nice to spend time together. But something in Sarah's expression told a different story. She was fidgeting with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. The same tell she'd had since childhood when she was hiding something. "Sarah," I said quietly, "how long have they been planning this?" She shot a quick glance at our parents, then back at her napkin. "I don't know what you mean." "The timing, the invitation, the bill. How long have you known about this?" Dad leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. "Son, you're making this way more complicated than it needs to be. Just pay the bill and let's have a nice evening." But I was thinking about other recent dinners. Mike's birthday last month at that seafood place downtown. I'd arrived late to that one too, found everyone finishing dessert, and somehow ended up with the check. And before that, Tom's graduation celebration at the steakhouse. Same pattern. Late arrival, finished meal, me holding the bill. "Sarah," I said again more firmly this time, "have they done this before?" The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Other diners chatted and laughed around us, oblivious to the tension building at our table. A waiter refilled water glasses at nearby tables, the sound of ice clinking against crystal, the only noise in our immediate space. Finally, Sarah's composure cracked. "Maybe a few times," she whispered. That's when the first real shock hit me. This wasn't some innocent miscommunication about timing. This wasn't my parents being thoughtless or disorganized. This was deliberate. They had systematically planned for me to arrive exactly when their expensive meal ended, creating a scenario where I'd feel obligated to pay rather than cause a scene. "A few times," I repeated. "Jack, don't make this into something it's not," Mom said quickly. But Sarah was already talking, the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. "They did it to Mike at Captain's Wharf last month, and to Tom before that at Morton's Steakhouse, and to Cousin Danny when he was in town for Christmas." The restaurant seemed to spin around me. My parents hadn't just scammed me, they'd been systematically working their way through our entire family, using each of us as personal ATMs for their dining entertainment. The elegant atmosphere of Romano's suddenly felt suffocating. I gripped the edge of the white tablecloth, trying to process what Sarah had just revealed. Around us, other families and couples enjoyed their meals in peaceful ignorance while my world tilted sideways. "Sarah, that's enough," Dad said sharply. "You're giving your brother the wrong impression." "What wrong impression?" I asked, my voice barely controlled. "That you've been using family members to pay for your restaurant bills?" Mom's laugh came out brittle and fake. "Oh, Jack, you're being so melodramatic. Families help each other. When we were your age, we took care of our parents. It's just the natural order of things. Taking care of parents doesn't mean being tricked into paying for meals I wasn't even invited to eat," I shot back. Dad removed his reading glasses and set them on the table with deliberate precision. "We raised you, didn't we? Fed you for 18 years. Put you through engineering school, bought you your first car. This is just the circle of life, son." I noticed he never actually denied the accusations. Instead, he was justifying them with a guilt trip that felt rehearsed. "How exactly did this work with Mike?" I asked Sarah directly. She glanced nervously between our parents, then leaned forward. "They told him to meet them at Captain's Wharf for dinner at 7:30. But they made reservations for 6 and were finishing their lobster tower when he showed up. They said there'd been a mix-up with the timing." "And Tom—" "Morton's Steakhouse. They told him 8 o'clock, but they'd been there since 6:15. $230 bill for prime rib and wine." Mom waved her hand as if swatting away flies. "You're making this sound so calculated. These were just innocent timing mistakes." "3 timing mistakes," I asked. "4, if you count tonight, all conveniently ending with someone else paying expensive restaurant bills." "5, actually," Sarah said quietly. The table fell silent except for the soft clinking of silverware from nearby diners. A waiter walked past carrying a tray of steaming entrees that filled the air with garlic and herbs. "5, I repeated. Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They got Cousin Danny twice when he was visiting for Christmas. Different restaurants both times." Dad's face was reddening now. Sarah, you're betraying family confidences. No, I said, my anger finally breaking through. She's telling the truth, something you two seem to have trouble with. Jack, lower your voice, Mom hissed, glancing around at other tables. People are starting to look. Maybe they should look, I said. Maybe everyone should know what kind of people pull these stunts. But even as I said it, I realized how this appeared to other diners. A family argument over a restaurant bill. Nothing more dramatic than that. They had no idea about the systematic deception, the careful planning, the rotation of victims. You want to know what else? Sarah continued, seeming to find her courage, now that the secret was out. They scout restaurants first. Mom looks up menus online, checks prices, reads reviews. Then they figure out which family member to invite based on who's been successful lately. This detail hit me like a physical blow. They'd been researching my recent promotion at work, my new salary, my financial situation. They know about your raise, Sarah added, confirming my suspicion. Mom saw it on your Facebook post about the new engineering project you're leading. I remembered that post. A casual update about taking on more responsibility at work maybe mentioned the raise in passing. I'd thought I was sharing good news with family. Instead, I'd been painting a target on my back. And they've been telling people you love treating family to expensive dinners, Sarah continued. Like it's your hobby or something. They've told Aunt Linda, Uncle Frank, even some of their friends from the country club. That's not true, I said, though my voice sounded weak even to my ears. Mom literally told Mrs. Henderson from next door that you insist on taking the family out to the finest restaurants and that you won't hear of anyone else paying. I stared at my mother, who was now avoiding eye contact entirely, focusing instead on reapplying her lipstick using her phone camera. Is that true? I asked her directly. People like to hear nice things about their neighbors' children, she said without looking up. It reflects well on our family. By lying about me, Dad leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. It's not lying if it becomes true. And you are picking up the check tonight, aren't you? The manipulation was so blatant it took my breath away. They'd created a reputation for me as someone who enjoyed paying for expensive family dinners, then used that reputation to justify tricking me into living up to it. Actually, I said, my voice growing steadier, no, I'm not picking up this check. Mom's lipstick stopped halfway to her mouth. Excuse me, I said no. You two enjoyed your anniversary dinner. You pay for it. The color drained from Dad's face. Son, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. But we don't have enough cash with us, Mom said, her voice suddenly smaller. Then use a credit card, like normal people do when they go out to eat. Jack, please, Sarah said, though she looked more relieved than upset. Maybe we could split it or something. Why should we split it? I asked. Did any of us besides them eat this food? Did we choose this restaurant? Did we agree to this expense? A waiter appeared at our table, clearly sensing the tension. Is everything all right here? Can I get you anything else? Actually, I said, looking directly at my parents, I think my parents would like to settle their bill now. The waiter glanced uncertainly between us. Of course, I'll bring the payment terminal right over. As he walked away, Mom's composure finally cracked completely. Jack, you're embarrassing us. People are watching. Good, I said. Maybe they should see what happens when someone says no to your little scheme. Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You'll regret this, son. Family loyalty goes both ways. If you can't be counted on for something this simple, maybe we need to reconsider our relationship. But his threat felt hollow now. I could see the panic behind his anger. They'd counted on my compliance, on my desire to avoid a scene, on my guilt about being a good son. Without that leverage, they were just two people who'd eaten an expensive meal they couldn't afford. The waiter returned with the payment terminal, setting it discreetly on the table. Whenever you're ready, he said with professional courtesy. My parents stared at the machine like it was a venomous snake. That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. If they couldn't afford to pay for this dinner themselves, How many other expensive meals had they eaten recently? How many other family members had they scammed? And what would they do when they ran out of relatives willing to bankroll their dining habits? I was about to find out the answers were worse than I could have imagined. The payment terminal sat on our table like a small black monument to my parents' predicament. Dad stared at it, as if willing it to disappear, while Mom's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. "We'll need to use the card," Dad finally said to Mom, his voice tight with embarrassment. "Which card?" she whispered back, apparently forgetting that Sarah and I could hear every word. "Try the Visa first." I watched this exchange with growing unease. They were discussing which credit card to use like they were gambling on which one might actually work. This wasn't just about not having cash. They seemed genuinely uncertain about their ability to pay at all. Mom fumbled through her wallet, pulling out several cards before selecting one. Her hands shook slightly as she inserted it into the machine. The terminal beeped twice and displayed a message that made Mom's face go white, "Declined." "Try another one," Dad said quickly, glancing around to see if anyone else had noticed. The second card produced the same result, then the third. Sarah and I exchanged glances across the table. My sister looked as shocked as I felt. Our parents, who lived in a nice house in the suburbs and drove relatively new cars, apparently couldn't pay for a $300 dinner. Maybe there's an issue with the machine. Mom said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear clearly, trying to save face. The waiter reappeared, probably summoned by some silent signal from the host stand. "Is there a problem with payment?" he asked discreetly. "Just a technical difficulty," Dad said with false confidence. "You know how these things can be." But I was starting to piece together a much darker picture. If my parents couldn't pay for tonight's dinner, how had they been affording all the other expensive meals Sarah had mentioned? The ones with Mike, Tom, cousin Danny, and who knows who else? "How many restaurants have you done this at?" I asked quietly. "Jack, not now," Mom hissed. "No, I think now is exactly the right time," I said, my voice growing stronger. "How many places? How many people?" Sarah looked like she wanted to sink into her chair and disappear. The waiter stood awkwardly nearby, clearly unsure whether to leave or stay. "This is not the place for this conversation," Dad said firmly. "Actually, this is exactly the place," I replied. "Since we're sitting in a restaurant where you can't pay your bill, and you expected me to cover it based on a lie." "It wasn't a lie," Mom protested. "We genuinely wanted to celebrate our anniversary with you. After you'd already finished celebrating without me." A woman at the table next to us glanced over with obvious curiosity. The gentle buzz of dinner conversation around us seemed to quiet slightly, as if people were straining to listen. "Keep your voice down," Dad warned. "Why?" I asked louder than before. Ashamed of something. That's when Sarah made the mistake that changed everything. "Just tell him about Mom's birthday dinner," she said quickly. "Maybe if he knows about the plans, he'll understand." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mom shot Sarah a look that could have melted steel, while Dad's jaw tightened to the point where I thought he might crack a tooth. "What about Mom's birthday dinner?" I asked. Sarah realized her error immediately, covering her mouth with her hand. But it was too late. "Nothing," Mom said quickly. "Just a small family celebration we're planning." "Where am I pressed?" Silence. "When?" More silence. "How many people?" Sarah looked like she was about to cry. "8, she whispered. "8 people," I repeated. "At what restaurant?" "The Capitol Grill." Sarah said the words barely audible. I knew the Capitol Grill. It was the most expensive steakhouse in the city. Entrees started at $60 and went up from there. Wine by the bottle could easily reach 3 figures. And let me guess, I said the full scope of their scheme becoming crystal clear. "You were planning to invite me to arrive just as everyone finished eating." Dad's silence was answer enough. 8 people at the Capitol Grill. I continued, my voice rising despite the public setting. "That's easily $800 to $1,000. Maybe more with wine and appetizers. And you were planning to stick me with the entire bill." "Family celebrations are important," Mom said weakly. Celebrations I'm not actually invited to participate in. The waiter cleared his throat gently. Perhaps I should give you a few more minutes to resolve the payment situation. Actually, I said, standing up from my chair, I'd like to speak with your manager. The color drained completely from both my parents' faces. Jack, sit down, Dad said urgently. Why, I asked, afraid of what I might tell them. There's no need to involve management, Mom said, her voice taking on a pleading tone. But I was already walking toward the host stand where a woman in a dark suit was reviewing reservation lists. The decision felt liberating, like finally choosing to swim toward shore instead of treading water in an ocean of manipulation. Excuse me, I said to the manager. I'm Jack Morrison. I'm at table 12, and I need to discuss a situation with you. She looked up with professional concern. Of course, Mr. Morrison. Is there a problem with your service tonight? I glanced back at my parents, who were watching with expressions of pure panic. Actually, I said, there's something I think you should know about my parents' dining habits. That's when I learned just how much worse this situation really was. The manager, who introduced herself as Patricia Valdez, led me to a quiet corner near the host stand where we could speak privately. She was an elegant woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the practiced demeanor of someone who dealt with every conceivable restaurant crisis. What can I help you with, Mr. Morrison? She asked. I glanced back at my parents' table where Mom and Dad sat, frozen like deer in headlights, while Sarah stared down at her hands. I need to ask you something that might sound strange, I began. Have my parents been here before? Patricia's expression remained professionally neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. We have many regular customers. I'd need to check our system to give you specific information. Please do, I said. I'll wait. While she walked to the computer terminal behind the host stand, I pulled out my phone and did something I should have done hours ago. I called my brother Mike. Hey, Jack, Mike answered on the second ring. What's up? Mike, I need to ask you about that dinner last month at Captain's Wharf. The one where you ended up paying for Mom and Dad. There was a pause. Yeah, what about it? Tell me exactly what happened from the beginning. Mike sighed. They called and invited me to dinner to celebrate my new job. Said to meet them at 7:30. When I got there, they were finishing dessert and coffee. They acted like I was late even though I was right on time. Then somehow I ended up with a $300 bill. Did they seem surprised that you were late? No, actually, now that I think about it. They seemed prepared for it. Like they already knew what they were going to say. My stomach twisted. Mike, I think we've been scammed. What do you mean? They just did the same thing to me tonight. Invited me to their anniversary dinner around 8, but they started eating at 6:30. Sarah let slip they've been doing this to multiple family members. You're kidding. I wish I was. Have you talked to Tom lately? Not since his graduation thing at that steakhouse, where he got stuck with the bill too, come to think of it. Can you call him right now? Ask him about that dinner. Sure, but why? Just do it. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I hung up and called Cousin Tom directly. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding slightly out of breath. Jack. Hey man, what's going on? Tom, quick question about your graduation dinner at Morton's. Can you tell me exactly how that happened? Oh, that? Yeah, kind of weird actually. Your parents called and said they wanted to take me out to celebrate finishing my master's degree. Told me to be there at 8. When I showed up, they'd already eaten. Said there was some confusion about the timing. And you paid... Well, yeah. I felt bad about being late, even though I could have sworn they said 8 o'clock. $310 including tip? Nearly maxed out my credit card. Tom, you weren't late. They scammed you. What? They're doing it to everyone. Me tonight, Mike last month, you before that? Probably others too. Are you serious? Dead serious. They invite people to expensive dinners, but start eating hours early, then act like we're late and guilt us into paying. That's fraud, isn't it? Before I could answer, Patricia returned with a tablet in her hand. Mr. Morrison, she said quietly, could I speak with you privately for a moment? I told Tom I'd call him back and followed Patricia to a small office behind the kitchen. She closed the door and turned to face me with an expression that told me everything I needed to know. "Your parents have been here 3 times in the past 2 months," she said carefully. "Each time with a different young man they claimed was their son." The words hit me like a physical blow. Different young man. The first time was about 6 weeks ago. They came with someone they introduced as their son, David. He seemed confused when they handed him the bill, but he paid it. "I don't have a brother named David." The second time was 3 weeks ago. They brought someone they called their son, Michael. That was probably my actual brother, Mike. And tonight makes the third time. Each incident followed the same pattern. They would arrive early, order expensive items, finish their meal. Then the young man would arrive looking confused about the timing. My mind raced. Who was David? I'm not sure, but I do know he paid a $420 bill for their dinner. $420. I felt sick. For 2 people. They ordered our most expensive wine that night and the lobster special. "Do you have security cameras?" "Yes, and I've already checked." The young man they called David appeared to be in his 20s, brown hair, wearing a business suit. He seemed genuinely shocked when they handed him the bill. I thought about all the young men in our extended family, friends, even family friends' adult children. How many people had my parents targeted? "There's something else," Patricia continued. "After the incident 3 weeks ago, we flagged their account. We were planning to speak with them if they returned." "Flagged how?" "We have an informal network with other upscale restaurants in the city. We share information about customers who cause complications." "What kind of complications?" "Bill disputes, payment issues, suspicious behavior. Your parents' pattern was unusual enough that we reported it." My phone rang, Mike calling back. "Excuse me," I said to Patricia, then answered. "What did Tom say?" "Jack, this is crazy. Tom said the exact same thing happened to him." But here's the weird part. He said he ran into cousin Danny last week, and Danny mentioned having the exact same experience with mom and dad. Twice. Twice? During his Christmas visit. 2 different restaurants, same pattern both times. Danny thought it was just bad luck with timing. I looked at Patricia, who was listening with growing concern. "Mike, how many people do you think they've done this to?" "I have no idea, but Tom's calling around to other cousins and family friends right now. He thinks they might have hit Emily and her boyfriend too." Emily, Aunt Sarah's daughter. She mentioned something about a weird dinner experience with them a few months ago. I hung up and turned back to Patricia. "How many other restaurants are in your network?" "In the immediate area, about a dozen high-end establishments." "Could you check if they've been reported elsewhere?" She was quiet for a moment, studying my face. "Mr. Morrison, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help me figure out how many people my parents have scammed." That's when I realized this wasn't just about family drama anymore. My parents weren't just being thoughtless or manipulative within our family circle. They were running a systematic con game that targeted strangers using lies about their relationships to steal hundreds of dollars at a time. And I was about to discover it was even worse than I thought. Patricia picked up her office phone and dialed a number from memory. "Maria, it's Patricia at Romano's. I need to check on a customer pair. Yes, I'll hold." While she waited, I called Mike back. "Mike, can you conference Tom and I need to ask you both something." A moment later, we had a 3-way call going. "Guys," I said, "think carefully. When mom and dad invited you to these dinners, did they use your last names when talking to restaurant staff?" "What do you mean?" Tom asked. "Did they introduce you as their son using your actual name? Or did they just say, 'our son'?" Mike was quiet for a moment. "Now that you mention it, they introduced me as Michael Morrison. But my last name is Patterson now. Remember, I changed it when Sarah and I got married last year." "And Tom, what about you?" "They said Tom Morrison too, I think. But that's not my name either. I'm Tom Bradley." My blood ran cold. They've been using fake family relationships, telling restaurants you're their sons, but giving you fake last names to match theirs. Patricia covered the phone receiver and whispered, "That's identity fraud." "Guys," I said into the phone, "this is way bigger than we thought. They're not just scamming family. They're using fake identities." "Jack," Mike said slowly, "if they're willing to lie about who we are to restaurants, what else have they lied about?" Before I could answer, Patricia's call connected. "Maria, I'm asking about a couple in their 50s. The woman wears pearls, the man has a Rolex. They've been bringing young men they claim are their sons. Yes, that's them." She listened for a moment, then her expression grew grave. "How many times? I see. And the amounts? That much? No, I understand. Thank you." She hung up and turned to me with a look that made my stomach drop. "That was Bella Vista, the Italian place on 5th Street. Your parents have been there twice in the past month. Different young men both times. The total for both visits was over $1,500. $1,500? I felt dizzy. The first time they brought someone they called their son James. 6-course tasting menu with wine pairings. $840. I don't know anyone named James in our family. The second time was someone named Robert. They ordered champagne to celebrate his promotion at work. $730. Robert, who do you have descriptions?" Patricia consulted her tablet. James was described as early 20s. Blonde hair, seemed very nervous about the bill. Robert was older, maybe 30. Dark hair, drove away in a Honda Civic. I thought about my parents' social circles. Dad played golf at a country club. Mom was involved in various charity committees. They knew dozens of young men through these activities. Sons of friends, employees of people they'd met, volunteers at charity events. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Called Emily. Same thing happened to her and boyfriend. Different restaurant. $600 bill. They told staff she was their daughter, Sarah." "They're using my name too," I told Patricia. "My sister, Sarah. They've been impersonating relationships with multiple people." She shook her head grimly. "Mr. Morrison, what your parents are doing is criminal fraud. They're obtaining services under false pretenses, using fake family relationships to manipulate young people into paying, and they're doing it systematically across multiple establishments. How do I stop them? First, we need to document everything. I'm going to contact the other restaurants in our network and get details on every incident involving your parents." She made another call, this time to someone named Frank at a steakhouse called the Metropolitan. "Frank, it's Patricia. I need you to check your incident reports. Yes, the Morrison couple. Really 4 times. What were the total amounts? Dear God." When she hung up, her face was pale. 4 visits to the Metropolitan in the past 3 months. Different young men each time. Combined total of over $3,000. 3,000. I sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. "Your parents have been systematically working their way through the most expensive restaurants in the city. They research menu prices, make reservations at peak times, order the most expensive items, then manipulate strangers into paying by claiming family relationships." My phone rang again. This time it was Sarah. "Jack, where are you? Mom and Dad are freaking out. They keep asking what you're telling the manager." "Sarah, how long has this been going on?" "I don't know what you mean." "The dinners, the scams. How long have you known about it?" She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Sarah, about 6 months," she whispered. "It started small, just family at first, but then they began targeting other people." "What other people?" "Friends' kids, people from Dad's golf club, sons and daughters of Mom's charity committee members. They research them on social media, find out about their jobs and financial situations, then create opportunities to meet them." "And you said nothing." "They promised to help pay for my wedding if I kept quiet. And they said it wasn't really hurting anyone because all these people were well off anyway." I felt sick. My own sister had been complicit in this scheme, helping to identify and target victims. "Sarah, they're criminals. What they're doing is fraud." "I know," she said, starting to cry. "I've been feeling horrible about it, but I was scared to speak up." Patricia was listening to everything, taking notes on her tablet. How many people do you think they've targeted? I asked Sarah. I don't know exactly. Maybe 15 or 20. They keep a list. A list? In Mom's desk at home. Names, phone numbers, social media information, notes about people's jobs and financial situations. They call it their networking contacts, but it's really targets for these dinner scams. I looked at Patricia, who was staring at me with an expression of professional horror. Mr. Morrison, she said quietly, your parents aren't just running restaurant scams. They're operating an organized fraud scheme that targets young adults across the city. This needs to be reported to the authorities. That's when I realized the conversation happening at table 12 was about to become very different, because my parents had no idea that their carefully constructed web of lies was about to collapse completely. And they definitely didn't know that I now had documented evidence of their crimes from multiple sources. I walked back to table 12 with Patricia beside me and my phone in my hand containing text messages from Mike, Tom, cousin Emily, and 3 other family friends who'd all confirmed similar experiences. My parents looked up as we approached, and I watched their faces cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally pure terror as they realized who Patricia was. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, Patricia said in her professional voice. I'm Patricia Valdez, the general manager here at Romano's. I need to speak with you about your dining history with us. Dad attempted a smile that looked more like a grimace. Is there a problem with our service tonight? Actually, yes, there is. Patricia placed her tablet on the table, showing them a screen with their customer history. 3 visits, 3 different sons, 3 paid bills totaling over $900. Can you explain to me why you've introduced 3 different young men as your son Jack over the past 2 months? The silence at our table was deafening. Around us, other diners continued their conversations, unaware they were witnessing the collapse of a criminal enterprise. I think there's been some misunderstanding, Mom said weakly. No misunderstanding, I said, sitting down across from them. I've just spent the last 20 minutes on the phone with Mike, Tom, cousin Danny, Emily, and several others. We've documented at least 12 separate incidents across 6 different restaurants. Dad's face went from pale to ashen. Jack, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. You've been running a systematic fraud scheme. You research targets through social media, learn about their financial situations, then trick them into paying for expensive meals by claiming fake family relationships. That's not true, Mom protested, but her voice carried no conviction. Patricia consulted her tablet again. Mrs. Morrison, 3 weeks ago, you brought a young man named David to this restaurant. You introduced him as your son and left him with a $420 bill. David's real last name isn't Morrison, is it? We can explain that. Please do, Patricia said calmly. But they couldn't explain it. How do you explain targeting a stranger, lying about your relationship to them, and manipulating them into paying hundreds of dollars for food they never ate? My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Mike. Tom found the list Sarah mentioned. In your parents' desk. 23 names with financial details and restaurant preferences. Took photos. I showed the text to Patricia, then looked at my parents. Mike found your target list. Mom gasped audibly. Dad closed his eyes as if he could will this entire situation away. A target list, Patricia asked. Names, phone numbers, financial information about potential victims. Sarah says you call it networking contacts, but it's really a database of people to scam. Jack, Dad said, his voice barely a whisper, you're destroying your family. No, I replied firmly. You destroyed our family when you decided to become criminals. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, I need to inform you that Romano's will be filing a report about this incident with local authorities. Additionally, I'll be sharing this information with the other restaurants in our network. You can't do that, Mom said, panic creeping into her voice. Actually, we can and we will. What you've been doing constitutes fraud, identity theft, and organized criminal activity. It's not that serious, Dad protested. We're just having dinner with people. You're obtaining services under false pretenses by claiming fake relationships and manipulating people into paying bills they never agreed to cover. Patricia replied. That's textbook fraud. I pulled out my own phone and set it to record. I want you both to explain to me exactly how this worked, from the beginning. Jack, don't, Sarah pleaded. Sarah, you're already implicated. You admitted to helping them target victims and keeping quiet in exchange for wedding money. My parents sat frozen, realizing that anything they said could be used as evidence against them. Here's what I know, I continued. You research young adults through social media and family connections. You learn about their jobs, financial situations, and dining preferences. Then, you invite them to expensive restaurants using fake family relationships, timing the invitation so they arrive after you've finished eating. When they show up confused, you manipulate them into paying by claiming timing mistakes and family obligation. Neither parent denied any of it. The part I don't understand, I said, is why you couldn't just pay for your own meals. You live in a nice house, drive decent cars, have credit cards. That's when Dad finally broke. The credit cards are maxed out, he said quietly. Have been for months. What? We owe about $40,000 across 6 cards, plus the second mortgage on the house, plus your mother's car loan. I stared at them in shock. You're broke. Not broke, Mom said quickly, just cash flow challenged. So instead of cutting back on expensive dinners, you decided to steal the money from other people. We weren't stealing, Dad protested. We were just sharing the experience. By lying about who people are and manipulating them into paying. Patricia leaned forward. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation. We have documented evidence of systematic fraud involving multiple victims and thousands of dollars. This isn't going away? My phone rang. It was Mike. Jack, you need to hear this. Tom's been calling the numbers on the target list. One of them was a 19-year-old kid named Marcus, whose parents know Mom and Dad from church. They took him to the Capitol Grill last month and stuck him with an $800 bill. The kid had to borrow money from his grandmother to pay it. $800, I repeated loudly enough for my parents to hear. From a 19-year-old. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad stared at the table as if he could bore holes through it with his eyes. There's more, Mike continued. Tom found receipts in the desk. They've collected over $12,000 from victims in the past 4 months, and there's a calendar with future dinner appointments scheduled through the end of the year. $12,000, I said, looking directly at my parents. You've stolen $12,000 from young people, including family members. We paid them back, Dad said weakly. When how? Silence. Patricia stood up. I'm going to call the police now. This conversation is over. Wait, I said. There's one more thing I need to know. I looked at my parents, these 2 people who'd raised me, taught me about honesty and integrity, told me that family always comes first. How many more people were on your list for the rest of the year? Sarah answered in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear her. 11. 11 more victims. 11 more young adults who would have been manipulated, lied to, and stolen from by the people who taught me that character matters more than money. That's when I realized it was time to make sure this stopped permanently. Patricia returned from making her call with a police officer in tow, a professional-looking woman in her 30s who introduced herself as Officer Martinez. I understand there's been an issue with fraudulent billing practices, Officer Martinez asked, pulling out a small notebook. My parents looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. Around us, other diners were beginning to notice the police presence, though Patricia had positioned our table in a corner to minimize the scene. These individuals have been systematically defrauding restaurant customers across the city. Patricia explained, handing Officer Martinez her tablet with the documented incidents. Over the next hour, Officer Martinez took detailed statements from Patricia, myself, and via phone calls, Mike, Tom, and several other victims. The scope of the scheme became clear: 23 identified victims, $12,400 in documented theft, 6 restaurants involved, and evidence of planned future crimes. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, Officer Martinez said when she'd finished taking notes, "You're both under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and organized criminal activity." "Please," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "We'll pay everyone back. We'll stop. Please don't arrest us." Ma'am, paying restitution doesn't erase the crimes already committed. You'll have the opportunity to work with prosecutors on repayment plans, but the criminal charges will proceed. As Officer Martinez read them their rights, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the scheme was stopped, sadness that my parents had chosen this path, anger at the victims they'd hurt, and strangely a sense of peace that justice was finally being served. Sarah sat crying quietly, realizing she'd likely face charges as an accessory. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I should have stopped this months ago." "You're right," I said. "You should have. But you can help make it right now by cooperating with the investigation and helping identify all the victims." Over the following weeks, the case moved quickly through the legal system. My parents pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud in exchange for reduced sentences and a structured restitution plan. They received 2 years of probation community service and were ordered to pay back every penny they'd stolen plus damages. Sarah pled guilty to conspiracy charges and received 1 year of probation in exchange for full cooperation. She provided detailed information about all the victims and helped track down people who hadn't even realized they'd been scammed. The most satisfying part was watching the victims get their money back. Marcus, the 19-year-old from the church, was thrilled to return the money he'd borrowed from his grandmother. David and Robert, the strangers my parents had targeted, were shocked to learn they'd been victims of a systematic scheme. I thought I was just having dinner with some lonely older couple who'd taken me for their son, David told me when we met for coffee. I felt bad for them. They seemed so grateful that their son had shown up. The story made local news, which was embarrassing for my family, but served an important purpose. 3 other young adults came forward with similar experiences, having been too confused or embarrassed to speak up before. My parents ended up owing over $15,000 in total restitution. 6 months after that night at Romano's, I met my parents for coffee, their first meal I'd shared with them since their arrest. They'd completed financial counseling and were working part-time jobs to pay their restitution while living in a small apartment they could actually afford. "Jack," Mom said, her voice shaky with emotion, "we need you to know how sorry we are. We lost sight of right and wrong. We convinced ourselves that what we were doing wasn't really hurting anyone because the people we targeted seemed successful. But it was hurting people," Dad added. "That boy Marcus had to borrow money from his sick grandmother. David maxed out his credit card and couldn't afford groceries for 2 weeks. We caused real harm to real people." They looked older, more fragile, but also somehow more genuine than they had in years. The fancy clothes and jewelry were gone, replaced by simple outfits from discount stores. Mom's famous pearl necklace had been sold to help pay restitution. "Have you learned anything from this?" I asked. "We learned that there's no shortcut to living beyond your means," Mom said. "We should have just eaten at Denny's and been grateful to spend time together. And we learned that lying about who people are isn't just unethical, it's criminal," Dad added. "When you claim someone is your son, to manipulate them into paying, that's identity fraud. I studied their faces looking for any sign of the manipulative people who tried to scam me at Romano's. What I saw instead were 2 broken individuals who'd finally hit rock bottom hard enough to recognize they needed to change. I'm proud of you for stopping us, Mom said quietly. It took courage to call that manager and involve the police. You saved us from becoming people we wouldn't have been able to live with. Sarah had moved in with them temporarily to help with expenses and provide emotional support. She'd lost her job when the criminal charges became public, but she'd found work as a bookkeeper for a small business and was slowly rebuilding her life. I've been thinking about what you said that night, Sarah told me. About how enabling someone's harmful behavior isn't love, It's just making things worse. I was so focused on getting wedding money that I helped hurt innocent people. She'd postponed her wedding and used the money she'd been saving to help pay restitution to victims. Her fiancé had stood by her, which I respected, but they were starting their marriage with a clear understanding of the importance of honesty. A year later, my parents had paid back all the restitution and completed their probation. They sent handwritten apology letters to every victim, not because they were required to, but because they wanted to take full responsibility for the harm they'd caused. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about restaurant scams or family loyalty. It was about the difference between loving someone and enabling them. For years, I'd thought being a good son meant going along with my parents' increasingly unreasonable requests, smoothing over their mistakes and avoiding confrontation. But real love sometimes means saying no. It means setting boundaries. It means refusing to participate in behavior that hurts others, even when that behavior comes from people you care about. The young adults my parents targeted weren't just random victims. They were people like Marcus working part-time jobs while attending community college, stretching every dollar. David saving up for an engagement ring while paying off student loans. Robert supporting his sick mother while building a small business. These weren't wealthy targets who wouldn't miss a few $100s. They were regular people trying to build better lives, and my parents nearly derailed those efforts for the sake of expensive meals they couldn't afford. Today, my parents and I have a relationship built on honesty and mutual respect. They live within their means, work to support themselves, and treat others with genuine kindness instead of calculated manipulation. They volunteer at a local food bank, helping people who actually need assistance rather than exploiting people for personal gain. Sarah finished her probation and married her fiancé in a small ceremony they paid for themselves. She works as a victim advocate, now helping people who've been targeted by financial scams. The restaurants in our city have implemented better systems for identifying suspicious billing patterns, and several have trained their staff to watch for the kind of manipulation tactics my parents used. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong in a relationship, whether family, romantic, or professional, it usually is wrong. The discomfort I felt walking into Romano's that night wasn't confusion about timing. It was my subconscious recognizing manipulation. Now, when someone tries to make me responsible for expenses, I didn't agree to situations I didn't create, or consequences of choices I didn't make, I remember that night. I remember how good it felt to finally say no. I remember that protecting yourself from manipulation isn't selfish, it's necessary. And I remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their harmful behavior until they choose to change. Looking back, I realized that calling the manager at Romano's wasn't just about stopping a restaurant scam. It was about choosing the kind of person I wanted to be and the kind of relationships I wanted to have. It was about deciding that truth matters more than comfort, that justice matters more than avoiding conflict, and that real family loyalty means holding each other accountable to be better people. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you loved was asking you to do something that felt wrong? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more stories about family drama, workplace conflicts, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear about the importance of setting boundaries with family members. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes saying no to someone you love is the most loving thing you can do. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next video.